The evening air had a bite to it as Tiana finished her shift at the Riverside Community Health Clinic. She pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders and adjusted the strap of her bag, heavy with patient files she'd brought home to review. The streetlights flickered on as the autumn sun dipped behind the city skyline, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Tiana's mind was occupied with the day's challenges: the mother of 3 who couldn't afford her blood pressure medication, the elderly man whose diabetes was worsening because he couldn't keep his food cold in his broken refrigerator, and the teen who needed mental health services the clinic couldn't provide. These were the faces that filled her thoughts as she walked her usual route home, past corner stores and apartment buildings with their windows lit from within. She'd been at the clinic for 5 years now, watching as funding dwindled and needs grew. Still, she loved her work as a community health worker. She'd grown up in this neighborhood, had seen firsthand how proper healthcare could change lives, how it had changed her grandmother's life when a dedicated nurse had caught her heart condition early. That memory had pushed Tiana through nursing school, through the long shifts and the heartbreak that sometimes came with caring for others. The sound of her phone ringing pulled her from her thoughts. It was her roommate, Delia. "Hey, I'm grabbing dinner from that new Thai place. Want anything?" Delia asked, her voice barely audible over the street noise. "Yes, please. Get me the pad thai. I'm about 20 minutes away," Tiana replied, already looking forward to a quiet evening at home. As she rounded the corner onto Maple Street, something caught her eye. A man in a tailored suit was leaning heavily against a parked car, his breathing labored. At first glance, he seemed out of place in this neighborhood. Expensive watch glinting under the streetlight, polished shoes that probably cost more than Tiana's monthly rent. But what struck her most was the panic in his eyes as he clutched at his throat. Without hesitation, Tiana rushed toward him, her training kicking in automatically. "Sir, are you all right?" she called out, already assessing the situation. The man tried to speak but could only make a choked sound. His face was flushing red and she could see hives beginning to form on his neck. "Are you having trouble breathing? Can you nod if you understand me?" Tiana spoke clearly, calmly, though her heart was racing. The man nodded weakly. "I think you're having an allergic reaction. Do you have an EpiPen with you?" She scanned his pockets, looking for the telltale shape of the life-saving device. The man shook his head, his eyes widening with fear as his breathing became more strained. His knees buckled and Tiana caught him, helping him to sit on the curb. "I need help," she called out to a couple walking nearby. "Call 911. Tell them we have a severe allergic reaction." The woman immediately pulled out her phone while her partner jogged over. "What can I do?" he asked. "Help me lay him down flat but keep his legs elevated," Tiana instructed, already opening her bag. She always carried a small emergency kit, a habit from her early days of community outreach when she'd visit homes with little access to medical supplies. "Sir, I'm a healthcare worker. I'm going to help you, but I need to know if you have any medical conditions." She spoke directly to him as she checked his pulse, rapid and weak. His lips were turning a worrying shade of blue. The man couldn't answer, but he managed to pull out his wallet with trembling hands. Tiana quickly found a medical ID card inside. "Severe peanut allergy," she read aloud. "No other listed conditions." From her bag, Tiana pulled out an antihistamine and a bottle of water. "This isn't as good as epinephrine, but it might help until the ambulance arrives. Can you swallow?" He nodded faintly. With the help of the bystander, Tiana supported the man's head as he took the medication. His breathing was becoming more labored and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. "The ambulance is 3 minutes out," the woman with the phone reported. "Sir, stay with me," Tiana urged, holding his wrist to monitor his pulse. "What's your name?" The man's lips moved, but no sound came out. His eyes, though clouded with pain, locked onto hers with an intensity that struck her, a mixture of fear and determination. Tiana continued to speak to him, her voice steady despite her concern. "The paramedics will be here any minute. You're going to be okay. Just focus on taking slow breaths through your nose if you can." She noticed his expensive briefcase had fallen open when he collapsed, papers spilling out onto the sidewalk. The letterhead caught her eye. Reynolds Innovations, one of the largest tech companies in the country. She quickly gathered the documents, tucking them back into the case to keep them from blowing away. In the distance, the wail of sirens grew louder. The man's eyes fluttered and his grip on Tiana's hand weakened. No, stay with me," she said more firmly, squeezing his hand. "Look at me. The ambulance is almost here. The man's lips moved again, and this time she heard a whisper. "Thank you." The ambulance rounded the corner, lights flashing against the darkening sky. Tiana waved them down, relief washing over her. "Severe allergic reaction to peanuts," she reported as the paramedics rushed over with their equipment. "Started approximately 10 minutes ago. No EpiPen available. I gave him an antihistamine about 5 minutes ago. He's having increasing difficulty breathing, and his pulse is rapid and weak." The paramedics worked quickly, administering epinephrine and oxygen. One of them looked at Tiana with appreciation. "You a nurse?" "Community health worker," she replied, stepping back to give them room. "I work at Riverside Clinic." "You probably saved his life," the paramedic said as they prepared to load the man onto the stretcher. "Another few minutes without intervention." The man's eyes found Tiana's again as they lifted him. There was something in his gaze. Gratitude, yes, but something else too. A question perhaps, or a promise. Then the doors of the ambulance closed and he was gone, whisked away toward the hospital with sirens blaring. The couple who had helped thanked Tiana and continued on their way. She stood alone on the sidewalk, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving her shaky and tired. It was only then that she realized she still had the man's wallet clutched in her hand. She opened it, intending to find his name so she could check on him later. The ID read Desmond Reynolds. As she slipped it into her bag to return to the hospital later, she noticed a business card had fallen out. Desmond Reynolds, CEO, Reynolds Innovations. Tiana's eyebrows rose in surprise. She'd just saved the life of a company CEO, one whose face occasionally appeared in the business section of newspapers. She'd never paid much attention to corporate news, too busy with the immediate needs of her community to follow the ups and downs of the business world. With a sigh, she tucked the wallet away and continued her walk home, her mind now filled with thoughts of the stranger whose life had intersected with hers so dramatically. She wondered if he would be okay, if he had family waiting for him, worried about his absence. By the time she reached her apartment building, the Thai food was the last thing on her mind. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs. The elevator was broken again, and unlocked the door to find Delia already, setting out containers on their small kitchen table. "You would not believe what just happened," Tiana said, dropping her bag on the couch. "Try me," Delia replied, sliding a plate toward her. "Your food's getting cold." As Tiana recounted the evening's events, she couldn't shake the image of the man's eyes. The fear in them, yes, but also the moment of connection when he'd thanked her. It was the reason she'd gone into healthcare in the first place, to be there when people needed help most. What she couldn't know, was that this chance encounter on a quiet street corner would ripple outward, changing the course of her life in ways she couldn't imagine. For now, though, she was simply Tiana, tired, hungry, and unaware that while she had saved a life tonight, her own was about to be transformed. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the first thing Desmond noticed when he woke up. The second was the sterile smell of hospital disinfectant. His throat felt raw as if he'd swallowed sandpaper, and his body ached with the peculiar exhaustion that comes after narrowly avoiding disaster. "Welcome back to the land of the living," a nurse said, as she checked his IV line. "You gave everyone quite a scare." Desmond tried to speak, but his voice came out as a croak. The nurse handed him a cup of water with a straw. "Small sips," she instructed. "Your throat's still swollen from the reaction." After a moment, he managed to ask, "How long have I been here?" "About 18 hours. You were admitted last night around 8 p.m. It's now early afternoon." Memories flooded back. The business dinner at the new fusion restaurant, the sudden realization that there must have been peanut oil in the sauce despite his careful questions to the server, the panic as his throat began to close, stumbling out to get fresh air, then a woman's face calm and determined amid his panic, dark eyes that held his gaze, a steady voice cutting through his fear. "There was someone who helped me," he said, his voice gaining strength. "A woman on the street," the nurse nodded. "The paramedics mentioned her, said she probably saved your life. Community health worker, apparently. I need to thank her." Desmond tried to sit up, then winced as his head spun. "What you need is rest," the nurse replied firmly. "Doctor will be by soon to check on you." But rest was the furthest thing from Desmond's mind. He'd faced death before, a car accident in college, a climbing mishap in his 30s, but never had he felt so helpless, so completely at the mercy of circumstance and a stranger's kindness. His phone lay on the bedside table. He reached for it, wincing at the pull of the IV in his arm, and saw dozens of missed calls and messages. His assistant, his board members, his ex-wife checking if he was still coming to their son's basketball game this weekend. None of them knew yet. The thought was oddly comforting. The doctor arrived an hour later, a tired-looking woman with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm Dr. Chen. You're lucky to be alive. If that woman hadn't found you when she did—" "I know," Desmond said quietly. "When can I leave?" Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "We'd like to keep you overnight for observation. Anaphylactic shock isn't something to take lightly." "I have meetings tomorrow that can be rescheduled," she interrupted firmly. "Your body just went through a massive trauma. Give it time to recover." Desmond wasn't used to being contradicted, but something in Dr. Chen's tone reminded him of his grandmother, who had raised him with equal parts love and no-nonsense practicality. He nodded reluctantly. "One more thing," he said as she turned to leave. "The woman who helped me, I'd like to find her. To thank her. All I know is she works at Riverside Community Health Clinic. Perhaps start there." After Dr. Chen left, Desmond called his assistant Raj. "Sir, where have you been?" "We've been trying to reach you since last night." Raj's voice was pitched high with worry. "Hospital," Desmond replied simply. "Allergic reaction. I'm fine now, but they're keeping me overnight. Cancel tomorrow's meetings." After Raj's exclamation subsided, Desmond continued, "I need you to look into something. Riverside Community Health Clinic. Find out everything you can about it, and about a woman who works there, a community health worker who was on Maple Street around 8 p.m. yesterday. May I ask why, sir? She saved my life. I want to thank her properly." After hanging up, Desmond lay back against the pillows, suddenly exhausted. Outside his private room, he could hear the bustle of the hospital, voices of staff, the squeak of cartwheels, a distant PA announcement. So much life continuing on, oblivious to how close his had come to ending. His hand went to his throat, remembering the terror of not being able to breathe. He'd built his company from nothing, amassed wealth beyond what his childhood self could have imagined, but none of that mattered when his airway was closing. In that moment, the only person who mattered was a stranger who stopped to help. By evening, Raj had delivered. Riverside was a small clinic serving a primarily low-income neighborhood. It operated on grants and donations, offering basic health care to those who might otherwise go without. It was currently facing funding cuts that threatened to reduce its services further. As for the woman, Raj had been less successful. "The clinic director wouldn't give me employee information, sir. Privacy concerns. But she did say they have several community health workers on staff." Desmond frowned. "Did you tell her why I was asking?" "Yes, sir." She seemed skeptical. Said they get a lot of big promises from wealthy people that rarely materialize. That stung, though Desmond understood the cynicism. He'd seen enough corporate charitable initiatives that were more about tax write-offs and PR than actual community impact. "Send flowers to the clinic tomorrow," he instructed, with a note thanking their staff, particularly their community health workers. "Don't use my name yet. Just say it's from a grateful patient." That night, Desmond slept fitfully, his dreams filled with fragments of memory. The woman's voice telling him to stay with her, the pressure of her hand holding his as darkness crept in at the edges of his vision, the strange clarity of her face when everything else was blurring. He woke before dawn, his mind clearer than it had been since the attack. By the time Dr. Chen arrived on her morning rounds, he had already showered and was dressed in the fresh clothes Raj had delivered. "Eager to leave us." "I see," she remarked, checking his vitals one last time. "I have a lot to do," Desmond replied. Dr. Chen handed him a prescription for a new EpiPen and care instructions. "Next time, don't leave home without it, and follow up with your regular doctor next week." An hour later, Desmond stood outside the hospital, breathing in the morning air. His driver waited at the curb, but instead of heading to his penthouse or office, Desmond gave a different address. "Riverside Community Health Clinic, please." The clinic was housed in a weathered brick building that had likely been beautiful once, with large windows and ornate cornices now in need of repair. Inside, the waiting room was already half full despite the early hour. A mother with a fussy baby, an elderly man with an oxygen tank, a teenager with his arm in a makeshift sling. The receptionist looked up as Desmond approached, her eyes widening slightly at his tailored suit and the sleek leather briefcase in his hand. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she wasn't sure he was in the right place. "I'm looking for someone who works here," Desmond explained. "A community health worker. She helped me during a medical emergency 2 nights ago, but I don't know her name." The receptionist's expression softened slightly. "Oh, you must be the one who sent the flowers. They arrived this morning." She gestured to a modest arrangement on a side table, brightening the drab space. Several staff members were admiring them, including a slender woman whose back was to Desmond. When she turned, Desmond felt a jolt of recognition. It was her, the same determined eyes that had held his as he struggled to breathe. She saw him at the same moment, surprise crossing her features before she walked over. "You're okay," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I was worried." "Thanks to you," Desmond replied, suddenly finding himself at a loss for words despite the speeches he routinely gave to rooms full of executives and investors. "Tiana Jackson," she said, extending her hand. "Though I guess we met already in a way." "Desmond Reynolds." He shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip.
"I came to thank you properly."
"And to return this." He pulled her wallet from his pocket. Tiana's eyes widened. "I completely forgot I had that. I was going to bring it to the hospital." Their fingers brushed as she took the wallet, and for a moment neither spoke. Around them, the clinic continued its morning rhythm. Phones ringing, patients being called back, the copy machine humming in the background. "I'd like to take you to lunch," Desmond said finally. "If you have time today, to thank you properly." Tiana hesitated, glancing around at the busy clinic. "I appreciate the offer, but I've got a full schedule. We're short-staffed as it is." "Dinner, then? Tomorrow?" A smile touched her lips. "You're persistent, Mr. Reynolds." "Desmond. And yes, it's a trait that served me well." He paused, then added more softly, "Please, you saved my life. At least let me buy you a meal." Tiana studied him for a moment as if weighing something in her mind. Finally, she nodded. "All right. Dinner tomorrow. But nothing fancy. I'm not a fancy restaurant kind of person." "Noted. I'll pick you up here. Around 7? Make it 7:30. We have a community outreach meeting until 7. As Desmond left the clinic, he felt lighter somehow, despite the lingering weakness from his ordeal. The city streets seemed different, brighter, more immediate. He noticed details he normally missed in his rush between meetings and obligations. The chalk drawings on the sidewalk outside a daycare, an old man feeding pigeons on a park bench, the intricate graffiti art on a building side wall. What he didn't notice was Tiana watching him from the clinic window, her expression thoughtful as she tried to reconcile the powerful CEO she'd read about online with the vulnerable man whose life had hung in the balance on a darkened street. Neither of them could guess how their worlds, so different in almost every way, were about to collide, challenge, and ultimately transform each other. Tiana checked her watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. The community outreach meeting had run late, as they always did, with passionate debates about how to stretch their dwindling resources. Now it was 7:25, and she still needed to finish her notes before Desmond arrived. "Hot date?" asked Pauline, the clinic's receptionist, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Not a date," Tiana replied firmly. "Just dinner with the man whose life I happened to save." Pauline raised an eyebrow. "The man who sent those lovely flowers? The man who, according to my niece who works in finance, is worth several $billions? That man," Tiana sighed. After Desmond's visit yesterday, she'd looked him up online. Reynolds Innovations was indeed one of the country's leading tech companies, with interests in everything from artificial intelligence to renewable energy. And Desmond Reynolds was its founder and CEO, a self-made billionaire who'd started the company in his garage 20 years ago. Yes, that man. "And it's still not a date," Pauline just smiled. "Well, whatever it is, you deserve a nice evening out." When was the last time you did something for yourself? Tiana couldn't remember. Between her work at the clinic, volunteer hours at the youth center, and caring for her grandfather on weekends, leisure time was a distant memory. "Go on," Pauline urged, taking the clipboard from Tiana's hands. "I'll finish these notes. Your billionaire is pulling up outside." Through the clinic's front windows, Tiana could see a sleek black car at the curb, not the flashy sports car she might have expected, but something elegant and understated, like the man himself, she realized. Desmond stepped out, dressed more casually than yesterday in dark jeans and a navy sweater that somehow still looked expensive. He held a small gift bag in one hand. "I'll see you tomorrow," Tiana told Pauline, grabbing her coat and bag. "Details," Pauline called after her. "I want all the details." Outside, the evening air was crisp with early autumn. Desmond smiled when he saw her, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Right on time," Tiana said, returning his smile despite her nervousness. "A habit my grandmother drilled into me," he replied. "She always said being late was like telling someone their time wasn't valuable." He held out the gift bag. "This is for you. Nothing extravagant, I promise." Inside was a small but high-quality medical kit, compact enough to fit in her purse but more comprehensive than the one she carried. "I noticed yours was pretty basic," Desmond explained. "This one has epinephrine, which might come in handy if you make a habit of rescuing people with severe allergies." Tiana laughed, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you. This is perfect, actually." "I remember you mentioned no fancy restaurants," Desmond continued, opening the car door for her. "So I thought we'd try Lola's. It's a small place in my neighborhood, family-owned. Best comfort food in the city." As they drove, the conversation flowed more easily than Tiana had expected. Desmond asked about her work at the clinic, listening with genuine interest as she described the challenges and rewards of community healthcare. "Most of our patients fall through the cracks of the system," she explained. "Too much income for Medicaid, too little for private insurance, or they're undocumented and afraid to seek help through official channels, or elderly and can't navigate the complexity of healthcare bureaucracy. And the clinic is facing funding cuts?" Desmond asked, recalling what his assistant had discovered. Tiana nodded, her expression darkening. "The grant that funds half our operations wasn't renewed. We've got maybe 3 months before we have to start cutting services, or staff," Desmond frowned. "That's criminal?" "Yeah, it is. But it's also reality for community clinics like ours." She paused, then added more lightly. "Sorry, I didn't mean to turn dinner into a fundraising pitch." "Don't apologize," Desmond said quietly. "I asked because I wanted to know." Lola's turned out to be a cozy restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop on a tree-lined street. The owner, a gray-haired woman with laugh lines around her eyes, greeted Desmond by name and led them to a corner table. "You come here often?" Tiana asked as they settled in. "At least once a week. Lola reminds me of my grandmother, who raised me after my parents died. Same no-nonsense attitude, same ability to show love through food." The vulnerability in his voice surprised Tiana. This wasn't the polished executive she'd expected. They ordered fried chicken for him, catfish for her, and talked as they waited for their food. Desmond asked about her background, and Tiana found herself sharing stories about growing up in the same neighborhood where she now worked. "My grandfather was a janitor at the local high school," she said. "He raised me after my mom died when I was 10, worked 2 jobs to put me through nursing school. He sounds like an amazing man." "He is. He's in assisted living now. Parkinson's. I visit him every weekend." Their food arrived, steam rising from the plates. For a while they ate in comfortable silence, the rich flavors a reminder of childhood Sunday dinners for both of them. "Can I ask you something?" Tiana said finally. "Why did you really want to have dinner with me? I mean, a thank you card or the flowers would have been more than enough." Desmond set down his fork, considering his answer carefully. "Honestly, because when I was lying there on the sidewalk, struggling to breathe, you were the only thing that felt real. Everything else was fading, but you, your voice, your eyes, you were clear as day." He paused, then continued more softly. "I've spent 20 years building a company, accumulating wealth, power, influence, and none of it mattered in that moment. What mattered was that a stranger stopped to help. It put things in perspective." Tiana nodded, understanding. "Near-death experiences tend to do that. Have you had one?" Desmond asked. "Not exactly, but I've been with people in their final moments. It changes how you see things." As they talked, the restaurant gradually emptied around them. Lola brought them coffee and homemade apple pie, refusing Desmond's attempts to pay. "Your money's no good tonight," she told him with a wink toward Tiana. "About time you brought someone special in here." Despite Tiana's protest that it wasn't a date, she found herself enjoying Desmond's company more than she'd anticipated. Behind the wealth and success was a man who listened, who seemed genuinely interested in her world. As they drove back to the clinic where her car was parked, Desmond said, I've been thinking about your funding situation. Tiana tensed slightly. I told you this wasn't a fundraising pitch. I know. But what if Reynolds Innovations established a grant specifically for community health initiatives, not just for your clinic, but for similar organizations throughout the city?
That would be
Incredible, Tiana admitted. But why would you do that? Desmond pulled up beside her car and turned to face her. Because it matters. Because places like Riverside save lives every day without recognition or reward. Because... He hesitated. Because I want to do something meaningful with all this success I've accumulated. Tiana studied his face, looking for signs of the typical wealthy savior complex she'd encountered before. The condescension, the desire for praise and recognition. She saw none of that in Desmond's eyes, only sincerity and something that looked like hope. If you're serious, she said slowly, I'd be happy to help shape a program that could really make a difference, but it would need to be sustainable, not just a one-time donation that looks good in press releases. Absolutely, Desmond agreed eagerly. In fact, I'd like you to lead it. Be my advisor on this. Help me understand what communities really need, not what corporate boardrooms think they need. Tiana blinked in surprise. Me? I'm just a community health worker. You're exactly who I need. Someone who understands healthcare from the ground up, not from an ivory tower. Someone who sees patients as people, not statistics. His passion was contagious, but Tiana had learned to be cautious about promises from powerful people. Can I think about it? Of course, Desmond replied, reaching into his pocket for a business card. My personal number is on the back. Call me when you decide. Their fingers brushed as she took the card, and Tiana felt an unexpected warmth in the contact. She tucked the card into her purse next to the new medical kit. Thank you for dinner, she said. It was not what I expected. In a good way, I hope? Tiana smiled. Yes, in a good way. As she drove home, her mind was filled with possibilities. The clinic saved with proper funding. Community health programs expanded. Real change for the neighborhood she loved. But along with those thoughts came questions. Could she trust Desmond's intentions? Was he just feeling grateful now? A feeling that would fade as the memory of his near-death experience receded? And why did her heart beat a little faster when she thought of seeing him again? By the time she reached her apartment, Tiana had made her decision. She would help shape this grant program, keeping her expectations realistic and her heart guarded. This was about her community, not about the unexpected connection she felt with a man from a world so different from her own. What she couldn't know was that across town, in his penthouse overlooking the city lights, Desmond was already making calls, setting things in motion, driven by something more profound than gratitude. A desire to create meaning from his second chance at life, and a growing fascination with the woman who had given him that chance. 3 weeks later, Tiana found herself sitting in a conference room on the 32nd floor of the Reynolds Innovations headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city, but her attention was focused on the passionate debate unfolding around the glossy table. With all due respect, Ms. Jackson, said a man in an expensive suit, his voice strained with forced politeness. We typically require detailed metrics and return on investment analyses for philanthropic initiatives of this size. Tiana leaned forward, meeting his gaze steadily. And with all due respect, Mr. Porter, you can't measure human lives saved with spreadsheets and pie charts. Porter's jaw tightened. Reynolds Innovations has shareholders to answer to. We can't just... We absolutely can, Desmond interrupted, entering the room with a stack of folders. He'd shed his suit jacket, and his sleeves were rolled up as if ready for real work. And we will. The Community Health Initiative isn't about ROI or shareholder value. It's about doing what's right. The tension in the room shifted as Desmond distributed the folders and took his seat at the head of the table. Though he'd kept his promise about Tiana leading the initiative, she'd insisted he be involved in key meetings. His presence silenced objections that might otherwise have derailed their progress. I've reviewed the proposal, Desmond continued, nodding toward Tiana. $5 million to start, with a commitment to renew annually based on community impact, not corporate metrics. The board has already approved it. Porter and the other executives exchanged glances. Tiana fought to keep her expression neutral, though inside she was giddy with triumph. $5 million would not only save Riverside Clinic but transform it and others like it throughout the city. We'll begin with Riverside as a pilot, Desmond explained. Then expand to 5 additional community clinics within 6 months. Ms. Jackson will oversee the entire initiative with complete autonomy. One of the executives raised her hand. What about press coverage? This could be excellent PR for the company. Tiana tensed, but Desmond was already shaking his head. No press releases, no corporate branding on the clinics, no photo ops with grateful patients. This isn't about making Reynolds Innovations look good. If word gets out organically, fine. But we're not using healthcare for the underprivileged as a marketing tool. The meeting continued, with details being ironed out and responsibilities assigned. Throughout it all, Tiana caught Desmond watching her with a hint of admiration in his eyes. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of planning sessions, site visits, and late-night phone calls as they shaped the initiative together. What had begun as a simple dinner had evolved into a partnership neither had anticipated. After the meeting, as the executives filed out, Desmond lingered behind. "You were incredible in there," he told her. "The way you stood your ground with Porter, I thought he might spontaneously combust." Tiana laughed. "I've dealt with tougher characters at the clinic. At least Porter didn't throw a chair at me." "Someone threw a chair at you?" Desmond asked, his eyes widening. "Just once. A patient in withdrawal. It missed, and afterwards he cried and apologized for an hour." She smiled at the memory. "We got him into a treatment program. He's 2 years sober now." Desmond shook his head in wonder. "Your world is so different from mine." "Not that different," Tiana replied. "We both try to solve problems and help people. You just have a lot more zeros in your budget." Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. Over the past weeks, they'd developed an easy rapport, their different perspectives and experiences creating a balance rather than a barrier. But beneath their professional collaboration, something else was growing, an awareness that hummed in the air between them during quiet moments like this. Desmond cleared his throat. "I'm hosting a dinner at my place this weekend. Nothing fancy, just a few friends. Would you like to come? Meet some people outside of work?" Tiana hesitated. Until now, they'd kept their relationship strictly professional, their interactions limited to the initiative. Crossing that line felt significant. "It's not a date," Desmond added quickly, as if reading her thoughts. "Just friends." "Friends," Tiana repeated, testing the word. "Okay. Yes, I'd like that." The smile that spread across his face was worth any misgivings she might have had. Saturday evening found Tiana standing outside Desmond's building, a bottle of wine in hand. The doorman greeted her by name. Desmond had called ahead, and directed her to the private elevator that would take her to the penthouse. She'd spent far too long deciding what to wear, finally settling on a simple yellow dress that her friend Delia insisted brought out the warmth in her skin. As the elevator climbed, so did her nervousness. What would Desmond's friends be like? Would they see her as an oddity? The charity case from the clinic? The elevator doors opened directly into Desmond's penthouse, a spacious apartment with the same stunning views as his office. But where his corporate space was all sleek modernity, his home was surprisingly warm. Comfortable furniture, walls lined with books, and paintings by local artists she recognized from community galleries. "You made it," Desmond said, coming to greet her. He wore jeans and a casual button-down shirt, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "Let me introduce you to everyone." To Tiana's surprise, there were only 4 other guests, and none were the corporate types she'd expected. Lola from the restaurant was there, along with her husband, Antonio. The other couple was Raj, Desmond's assistant, and his wife, Priya, a pediatrician at the Children's Hospital. "We were beginning to think you were a figment of Desmond's imagination," Priya told Tiana as they helped prepare dinner in the kitchen. "He's talked about you so much." "Has he?" Tiana asked, glancing toward the living room where Desmond was deep in conversation with Antonio. Priya smiled knowingly. The mysterious woman who saved his life and then proceeded to revolutionize his thinking about corporate philanthropy? "Yes, you've been mentioned once or twice." In the living room, Antonio was sharing stories from his days as a session musician before he and Lola opened their restaurant. Desmond laughed at something Antonio said, then looked up and caught Tiana's eye across the room. The warmth in his gaze made her breath catch. Dinner was served family-style at a table beside windows overlooking the city lights. The conversation flowed as easily as the wine, touching on everything from music to politics to the best places to find authentic tamales in the city. "How's your grandfather doing with the new treatment?" Desmond asked Tiana as they cleared the dishes together later. She smiled, touched that he'd remembered. Much better. The tremors are less severe and he's walking more steadily. The specialist you recommended made all the difference. I'm glad, he said simply. Tiana had been hesitant when Desmond first offered to connect her grandfather with a top Parkinson's specialist. It had felt too personal, too close to charity. But Desmond had framed it as a professional courtesy, and her grandfather's improved condition had erased any lingering doubts. After dessert, Lola's famous flan, Antonio pulled out a guitar that Desmond kept for him, and the evening turned musical. Antonio played, Lola sang in a rich contralto, and even Raj revealed a surprisingly good voice. The formality of the evening melted away entirely as they sang songs from their childhoods and shared the stories behind them. What about you? Lola asked Tiana. Any hidden talents? Tiana shook her head. I can't carry a tune in a bucket, but I do love to dance. Antonio immediately switched to a livelier rhythm, and Priya pulled Tiana to her feet. Soon they were all dancing in Desmond's living room, furniture pushed aside to create space. When the music slowed, Desmond approached Tiana. May I? He asked, holding out his hand. She nodded, suddenly shy as he placed one hand lightly on her waist, the other holding hers. They moved together to the gentle melody, and Tiana was acutely aware of his nearness, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way his eyes never left hers. Thank you for coming tonight, he said softly. Thank you for inviting me. Your friends are wonderful. They're my real family, Desmond admitted. The people who knew me before I was Desmond Reynolds, CEO, the ones who still call me on my bullshit. Tiana laughed. Everyone needs people like that. Who are yours? He asked. My grandfather, my roommate Delia, Pauline from the clinic, a few others. The song ended, but they continued swaying together, neither quite ready to step away. I'm glad you saved my life, Desmond said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. I'm glad I was there to save it, she replied. It was past midnight when the party finally wound down. Raj and Priya left first, followed by Lola and Antonio, who hugged Tiana like they'd known her for years. Come by the restaurant any time, Lola told her. Any friend of Desmond's is family to us. When they were gone, a comfortable silence settled over the penthouse. Tiana knew she should leave too, but found herself lingering, helping Desmond gather glasses and straighten the furniture. You don't have to do that, he protested. I have a cleaning service. Force of habit, she replied. My grandfather always said never leave a mess for someone else to clean up. Desmond smiled. Your grandfather sounds a lot like my grandmother. She'd have liked you, would she? Tiana asked, genuinely curious. Very much. She valued honesty and hard work above all else, and she could spot a phony from a mile away. When the living room was tidy again, Desmond walked Tiana to the elevator. I'll have my driver take you home. That's not necessary. I can call a ride share. At this hour? Please, I'd feel better knowing you got home safely. Tiana relented, touched by his concern. As the elevator doors opened, she turned to thank him for the evening and found him standing closer than she'd realized. Tiana, he said softly. Her name almost a question. She looked up at him, at the uncertainty and hope in his eyes, and made a decision. Rising on her toes, she pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. Good night, Desmond, she whispered. Thank you for everything. As the elevator descended, Tiana touched her lips, wondering at her own boldness. The evening had changed something between them, shifted their carefully maintained boundaries. What that meant for their future, both the initiative they were building together and the undeniable connection growing between them, remained to be seen. But for the first time since meeting Desmond Reynolds, Tiana allowed herself to imagine possibilities beyond professional collaboration. What she couldn't know was that upstairs, Desmond stood with his fingers pressed to his cheek, a smile spreading across his face as he made plans of his own. 6 months later, Tiana stood in the newly renovated waiting room of Riverside Clinic, hardly able to believe the transformation. Gone were the cracked linoleum floors and flickering fluorescent lights. In their place were warm wood tones, comfortable seating, and natural light streaming through enlarged windows. But the changes went far beyond aesthetics. The new pediatric wing opens next week, Dr. Chen said, joining Tiana by the reception desk. We've already scheduled 20 children who've been on waiting lists for specialists. Tiana nodded, her chest tight with pride and gratitude. And the mobile clinic? fully equipped and ready to roll. We'll start visiting the senior housing complexes on Monday, then the homeless encampment by the river on Wednesday. This was what success looked like, not the shiny renovations, but the expanded services, the additional staff, the ability to reach those who couldn't reach them, all made possible by the community health initiative that had grown beyond anyone's expectations. You did this, Dr. Chen said, squeezing Tiana's shoulder. You and your millionaire, Tiana laughed. Billionaire, actually, and he's not mine. Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow but said nothing more as she headed back to her patients. The exact nature of Tiana's relationship with Desmond had become a subject of good-natured speculation at the clinic. The truth was both simpler and more complicated than her colleagues imagined. Over the past 6 months, they'd developed a partnership that defied easy categorization. They worked closely on the initiative, with Tiana overseeing the operations and Desmond handling the corporate side. Their professional respect for each other had deepened into friendship, and that friendship had slowly evolved into something more. Shared dinners, long walks through the city, conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Yet neither had pushed for a formal definition of what they were to each other. There remained an unspoken caution, an awareness of the worlds that still separated them despite the bridges they'd built. Tiana's phone buzzed with a message from Desmond. Still on for today? Car will be there at 3, she smiled as she typed her reply. Wouldn't miss it. Today was the official launch of the expanded initiative, the announcement that Reynolds Innovations would be funding similar community health programs in 5 cities across the country, with Tiana as the national director. It was a dream role she hadn't dared to imagine, using her frontline experience to shape healthcare for underserved communities on a scale that could truly make a difference. At 3 o'clock, she slipped out of the clinic, leaving it in Dr. Chen's capable hands. Desmond's car was waiting, but instead of the driver she expected, Desmond himself sat behind the wheel. What happened to Thomas? She asked as she slid into the passenger seat. Day off, Desmond replied with a grin. I do still remember how to drive, you know. As they navigated through city traffic, Tiana noticed they weren't heading toward the Reynolds Innovations headquarters where the launch event was scheduled. Are we taking a detour? A small one, Desmond admitted. There's something I want to show you first. 20 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a familiar building, her grandfather's assisted living facility. Tiana turned to Desmond, confused. My grandfather isn't expecting us, is he? He has physical therapy on Thursday afternoons. Not today he doesn't, Desmond said cryptically. Come on. Inside, instead of heading to her grandfather's room, Desmond led her to a previously unused wing of the building. A sign above the entrance read Jackson Rehabilitation Center. What is this? Tiana asked, her heart beginning to race. Desmond's eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. See for yourself. The doors opened to reveal a state-of-the-art rehabilitation facility, exercise equipment, therapy pools, and advanced technology she recognized from research papers but had never seen in person. And in the center of it all, surrounded by smiling staff members, sat her grandfather in his wheelchair, looking more animated than she'd seen him in years. Grandpa. Tiana rushed to him, kneeling beside his chair. What's going on? He took her hand in his, the tremors noticeably reduced. Your young man has been busy, he said with a wink toward Desmond. Got me into some experimental treatment program. Been keeping it secret for weeks. Wanted to surprise you. Tiana turned to Desmond, who hung back, watching their reunion with quiet satisfaction. The treatment is showing promising results for Parkinson's patients, he explained. But it's expensive and not covered by insurance yet. So I thought, why not bring it here? Create a center that serves both the residents and the broader community. Named after my grandfather, Tiana said softly, reading the plaque on the wall that detailed William Jackson's lifelong service to the community as a school janitor, mentor, and foster parent. A great man deserves to be remembered, Desmond said simply. Tiana's grandfather chuckled. I told him it was too much, but he's stubborn, this one. Reminds me of you. The tour of the facility continued, with the lead therapist explaining the programs they'd be offering and how they planned to serve those who couldn't afford such care elsewhere. Throughout it all, Tiana felt a jumble of emotions, gratitude, joy, and something deeper she wasn't quite ready to name. When it was time to leave for the launch event, Tiana hugged her grandfather tightly. Be good to that young man, he whispered in her ear. He loves you, you know. Grandpa, she protested, but he just patted her hand knowingly. In the car, Tiana was uncharacteristically quiet, processing everything she'd seen. Desmond glanced at her occasionally, but didn't push for a reaction. Finally, she turned to him. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted it to be a surprise, he said, and I wanted to do something that wasn't about the initiative or Reynolds Innovations. Something just for you. It's the most thoughtful thing anyone's ever done for me, Tiana admitted. But it's also a lot, Desmond. My grandfather's name on a building. He deserves it, Desmond said firmly. Not because he's your grandfather, but because of who he is. The center director interviewed him, you know. Heard his stories about the kids he mentored, the families he helped. That man raised you while working 2 jobs and still found time to be a pillar of his community. If that doesn't deserve recognition, I don't know what does. Put that way, Tiana couldn't argue. Her grandfather had always been her hero, not for grand gestures, but for the quiet dignity with which he'd faced life's challenges and his unwavering commitment to helping others. They arrived at Reynolds Innovations headquarters with just enough time for Tiana to compose herself before the event. As they rode the elevator up to the conference center, Desmond took her hand. Are you ready for this? To take the initiative national? Tiana nodded. It's a big step, but it feels right. Like everything that's happened since that night on Maple Street has been leading to this. The launch event went perfectly. Tiana spoke passionately about the impact the initiative had already had at Riverside and the potential to transform community healthcare across the country. Desmond announced the expanded funding and Tiana's new role to enthusiastic applause. Even Porter, who had been so skeptical at the beginning, seemed genuinely supportive. Afterward, as the crowd mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, Desmond drew Tiana out onto the terrace overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. 6 months ago, I thought I was going to die on a sidewalk, Desmond said, his voice reflective. Now I'm standing here with you, watching this initiative we built together take flight. Life is strange. In the best ways, Tiana agreed, looking out at the city, her city, where lights were beginning to twinkle on as darkness fell. Somewhere out there was Maple Street, where their story had begun. I've been thinking, Desmond said, turning to face her, about us, about what happens next. Tiana's heart quickened, and the initiative is solid now. It has funding, structure, support. It doesn't need daily oversight from either of us anymore. He paused, looking suddenly uncertain, which means our professional obligations to each other are changing. Are you firing me? Tiana asked, only half joking. The opposite, Desmond replied with a smile. I'm setting you free. The national director role is yours, regardless of anything else. Your work stands on its own. Tiana understood what he was saying, that whatever happened between them personally, her position was secure. It was a gesture of respect that touched her deeply. And what about that anything else? She asked softly. Desmond took a deep breath. I love you, Tiana. I think I've been falling in love with you since you held my hand on that sidewalk and told me to stay with you. But I know our worlds are different, and I know you value your independence, so I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know. Tiana looked at him, really looked at him. Not Desmond Reynolds, the billionaire CEO, but the man who had joined her on clinic visits in the roughest neighborhoods, who had listened to her ideas with genuine respect, who had remembered her grandfather's physical therapy schedule and created a rehabilitation center that would help countless people like him. You know what my grandfather just told me? She said. He said you love me, and that I should be good to you. Hope flickered in Desmond's eyes. Wise man, your grandfather. He also said you remind him of me. Stubborn. Desmond laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. Tiana stepped closer to him. I love you too, she said simply. Our worlds may be different, but we've created something new together, in the initiative and between us. Something that belongs to both worlds and neither. The kiss they shared as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky felt like a beginning, not just for them, but for all they would build together in the years to come. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand along Maple Street, retracing the path where they'd first met, Tiana thought about the strange twists of fate that had